Hello and welcome to Son of a Glitch. Join us as we explore some of the internet's craziest glitch stories. Story 1. I'm a 36-year-old woman living in Norway, and this story of mine is truly mind-bending. There's a precursor to the story that happened to me when I was around 8 years old that I won't go into here, but just know that paranormal experiences set a firm belief in me when I turned 13. If I ever were to experience something like that again, any paranormal thing, I would face it. If it took 10 years, 30 years, or 50 years, I would wait for it and face it head-on next time it happened. When I was 22 years old, I went out one late night from my parents' house where I lived to have a smoke. We lived in an ordinary Norwegian neighborhood with houses stretching along both sides of my street. As I went outside, I saw it was a clear night sky, and as I'm fascinated by our universe, I always took my time looking at the stars whenever I could. To get a better view, I went out through our fence gate and stood in the middle of the street, looking up. The stars were beautiful and much clearer than they usually were. As I'm standing there, I start to hear someone approaching me from a distance down the street, maybe 30 to 40 meters away. It was very dark since it was late autumn and very late at night, but I still tried to see who it was. I could only hear the footsteps. As I'm standing there squinting with my eyes and shifting my body to get a better view, I realized that if the person could see me, they'd probably think I was mad, standing there in the middle of the street late at night, smoking a cigarette, moving around, and looking intensely. So, I just went inside our fence gate and stood there instead. I still wanted to know who was approaching on my street, so I moved to our driveway where I could have a better look. There was nothing blocking my view here except for my closest neighbor's hedge, which was about 70 centimeters tall. I had a good overview of the whole street. But there was nothing, just the sound of someone's footsteps slowly walking toward me down the street. It was then I realized this wasn't normal. This was paranormal. The sound of the footsteps was now about 10 meters away, but I couldn't see anyone. Every cell in my body screamed, "I've been waiting for you, you bastard." I had sworn to myself that I would confront it whenever it happened again, and boy, was I hell-bent on it. The whole thing made no sense. I could feel it in my bones that it was paranormal, but in my logical brain, the only rational possibility left was if it was a small person walking who was shorter than my neighbor's hedge, thus blocking my view of them. To eliminate this possibility, I stepped out from our driveway, looking right down the road with nothing to obscure my vision. Nothing. There was no one there, just the sound of footsteps right in front of me. I kid you not, the sound of the footsteps was now coming from 3 to 4 meters directly in front of me. He was right there, right in front of me, but I saw no one. I now truly understand the mechanism of fight or flight, because my whole body just acted on its own and started to run. You see, I was hell-bent in my mind to confront him. I had been waiting nearly a decade for it. But your body just goes on autopilot, and in my case, it ran. There was nothing to fight against. I ran to our house entrance door, which was further away from him, but I was still determined to find out what the hell was going on. I stood there looking instead, as I felt a little safer close to the door. Sure enough, the sound of someone walking slowly was still there, but now he also had a bicycle with him that he led beside him. How did I know? Do you remember when you were a kid and put small plastic balls in bicycle spokes, so they made that cling 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 sound as the wheels turned? It was exactly that sound, alongside his footsteps. I looked as he passed the gate, where I could see right through to the whole street. No one was there, just cling cling cling. I tried to see him through the gaps in my fence as he passed, but to no avail. The next clear path to my eyes was between my fence and my other neighbor's driveway. He walked with his bicycle halfway up my neighbor's driveway, cling cling, and then it all stopped. I was certain that he had now noticed me. I felt that he was looking at me, and for some reason, I just knew that it was a boy. I could feel it. For a brief moment, I was terrified that some ghostly apparition would come flying at my face, but suddenly he dropped his bicycle and started to run down the street. It was like lightning struck my whole body. Oh no, you won't get away that easily. I sprinted toward our fence gate after him. When I got through the gate, I looked down the street where he had sprinted to and found nothing. No bicycle left behind and no boy. There was no way someone could have sprinted the 30 meters down the street to the first turn before I sprinted my 7 meters out to the street. I calmed down. The experience was over. But then I noticed something. I noticed just how bright the street was. I could clearly see down the whole street. How could I not have seen him in the first place? I looked up. The stars were not anywhere near as bright anymore, and suddenly I realized the street lamps were on. They couldn't have been turned on the first time I went out into the street. It was very late at night, and the lamps come on as soon as it gets a little dark outside. No, they hadn't just switched over to night mode. That boy that I heard had extinguished the entire street's electricity with his presence. I never had the feeling that this was a ghost. He felt very much alive. I believe I got an audio glimpse into a clashing parallel universe where maybe most things are similar, and some are not. Maybe it was daytime for the boy, and he was out with his bicycle. Maybe my house was an old, abandoned one. And maybe he eventually also clashed into my universe, seeing my silhouette standing there in the doorway of this creepy old house, looking intensely at him. Well, no wonder the poor boy dropped his bicycle and ran for his life. Story 2. Work's been a bit rough lately. Due to some hour shortages last month, things are picking back up, thankfully. Because of that, things have been a bit tight, and currently I'm low on a lot of things, including groceries, until I get paid in a couple weeks. So today, I want to make something to eat. I knew I had ground beef in the fridge, so I figured I'd throw something together. Maybe taco pasta or whatever. I make my own taco seasoning. Got the beef going in the pan, set a pot on the stove, reached into the cupboard for some pasta, and pulled out something I've never seen in my life. A pack of Burkel macaroni, labeled completely in German, with zero English anywhere on it. I live in Canada. I've never bought this. I've never even seen this brand. It's not sold at any store I've ever been to. So there I am, just standing there, holding this foreign, obscure egg noodle, like it's some kind of cursed object dropped from another dimension. I live alone. Nobody's been in my house for about a month, and the last time someone was here, it was for one reason, and it definitely wasn't to sneak German pantry goods into my cupboard. I order all my groceries online, through a delivery service, because I hate grocery shopping. So I went into the app to check. No record of it, not in any past order. I even searched the entire store's inventory. Burkel doesn't exist on the platform. I've never even been to Germany. And to make it weirder, a few months ago, I rearranged my kitchen. I moved all the pasta into a new cupboard. This pack wasn't there then. Hell, I was in that cupboard yesterday, it wasn't there. I just searched it online, and you can't even buy it in Canada. Only a few websites come up, and they're all German websites I've never heard of. This shouldn't be here. No logical explanation fits here. So I've fallen back to magic. I've had some experiences with the universe, and a bit of manifestation weirdness. Maybe I manifested it without realizing. Maybe an alternate dimension version of me visited Germany, and thought, you know what I need? A noodly souvenir. And that timeline crossed over this one? Or maybe two timelines crossed. One where German is the default language here because Germany won? I don't know, man. Or maybe there's a German god of pasta who looked down and said, he must eat today. Whatever the case, I'm shaken. I don't have an explanation. I just cooked the glitch. And it tasted alright, but since I couldn't read the label, I'm a bit concerned about whether there were terms of use for this magic pasta. Open to theories, because this has wrecked my brain. Story 3. About a month ago, I was sitting on my couch. It was around 9:45 p.m., and I was listening to a Glitch in the Matrix video on YouTube. I had just discovered the channel and had been backtracking through their older videos, catching up on stories I had missed. Anyway, I was listening on my phone with my earbuds in. I got through a couple of stories, and as I heard the 6 musical notes that play between the stories, I decided to pause and take a bathroom break. My bathroom is about 12 paces from my couch, so I went in and did my thing. As I was looking in the bathroom mirror while washing my hands, I noticed my left earbud was missing. I immediately looked on the floor and in the sink. Luckily, the sink had a stopper in it, so it couldn't have fallen down the drain. I checked my shirt and the bathroom counter. Nothing. I didn't hear it hit the floor either. I retraced my steps, all 12 of them, back to the couch and searched the floor. I thought for sure I'd find it there. No luck. I searched the couch, checked under the cushions, and even looked under the furniture. The earbud was nowhere to be found. Frustrated, I decided I'd look for it again in the morning. The next morning, I did a thorough search of the living room, the bathroom, and the hallway. Still nothing. At this point, I started to think maybe my dog had picked it up and carried it somewhere. But even then, I couldn't find it. I used my phone to locate the earbud, but it only showed the right one. I finally accepted that it was gone and reluctantly started thinking about ordering a replacement. Fast forward 2 days. I was doing my weekly laundry. After washing my clothes, I opened the dryer door to move them into the dryer. And there it was. My missing earbud was sitting all by itself at the bottom of the dryer drum. I was stunned. How? I hadn't washed any clothes between losing the earbud and finding it. There was no reasonable explanation for how it got there. Yet there it was. And to make it even more bizarre, the earbud still worked perfectly. It was as if it had simply vanished for 2 days and reappeared in the dryer, completely unaffected by whatever had happened. To this day, I have no idea how it got there or where it was during those 2 days. But, if nothing else, I'm glad it still works. Story 4. Unlike most of the stories you hear, there was nothing unusual going on around me when this happened. No strange atmosphere, no eerie stillness, no sudden change in weather or shifts in light. Everything felt completely normal. To give you some context, I live in Regina, Canada, and I've worked as a steelworker for many years. I lead a pretty simple life, stable home, good friends, and I even have a cat and a goldfish. My partying days are behind me, and most of my time off is spent puttering around the house or polishing my car. Like many people, I've settled into a quieter rhythm as I've grown older. I work 12-hour graveyard shifts on a rotating schedule, so sleep is critical for me, especially after those long, grueling shifts. I usually head straight to bed after work, whether it's between shifts or the start of my days off. This event took place in October of last year, on the first day of my days off. I woke up late in the day, around 6:30 p.m., just in time for the start of hockey season. As any Canadian can tell you, hockey season is a big deal. It's like cricket in India or baseball in the US. It's part of our culture. My team had their season opener that night, and I was excited to see how they'd perform. I had just woken up, grabbed some leftovers from the fridge, cracked open a beer, and settled onto the couch. The national anthems were playing, and as the puck dropped, I was ready to enjoy the game. I watched the first period very closely, wanting to get a feel for the new players we'd picked up in the off-season. It was a good start. My team was leading 1-0 against a hated rival. A little before the end of the first period, during a commercial break, I decided to take my empty plate to the kitchen and grab another beer. I wasn't gone for more than 45 seconds, just a quick trip to dump the plate and grab a fresh drink. When I walked back into the living room, I froze. The first period was over, the intermission had passed, and the game was already well into the second period. What's worse, my team, which had been leading 1-0, was now losing 2-1. I stood there in complete shock. I couldn't have been gone long enough for all of that to happen. I looked at the clock, and it confirmed that only a minute had passed since I'd left the room. I started looking around, hoping there was some logical explanation. Maybe the broadcast had skipped ahead? But no, the live icon was still on the screen, and everything else seemed normal. I tried to shake it off and convince myself that I was mistaken. But then I looked at my beer. Normally, during a hockey game, I'd already have a couple of empties by this point. But there was only one can on the counter, the one I'd just finished. That confirmed it. This wasn't some weird memory lapse. I hadn't been watching the game while zoned out. Time had actually jumped forward. I sat back down, trying to make sense of what had happened, but I couldn't. I've replayed the event in my mind so many times since then, and I still have no explanation. I know what I saw. I know what I experienced. It was as if time itself had skipped ahead, taking me along for the ride without my consent. To this day, I can't explain it. It was one of the strangest moments of my life, and I hope it never happens again. Thanks for giving me a platform to share my story. Hopefully, someone out there has had a similar experience, or at least an idea of what might have happened. Story 5. When my son and I first moved into our apartment 4 years ago, I was 34, and he was 11. He was just old enough to stay home alone while I worked, and I was often on afternoon or midnight shifts. I'd always told him to message me if he needed anything, and I'd come straight home. It was only about a 7-minute drive. One cool autumn night, I was home, and I had cracked open my windows to let in the breeze. My son had a fan in his room, and though his window had screens, mine didn't. I didn't think much of it at the time. That night, I had a vivid dream. In the dream, I was watching myself sleep from above, like I was floating. I saw something scratching at the wall beneath my open window. Whatever it wasn't friendly, and it was about to jump into my room. I woke up in a panic, jumped out of bed, and shut my window. Still uneasy, I went into my son's room and crawled into bed with him, feeling safer there. I forgot about the dream until a week later. My son was home alone one night while I was on a midnight shift. He usually slept in my bed when I worked overnight. At around 3 a.m., I got a message from him, saying he was really scared and asking me to come home. Worried, I clocked out immediately and drove home as quickly as I could. When I got there, He hugged me tightly and told me about a dream he'd just had. To my shock, it was the exact same dream I'd had the week prior. He described the scratching at the wall beneath the open window, the sense of something about to come into the room, and even the part where he jumped up and shut the window with his eyes closed. I felt chills run down my spine. I hadn't told him about my dream, so how could he have experienced the same thing? After that, I took a few days off work to make sure he was okay and to get him a cat. I'd always heard that cats are great at protecting against bad spirits, and I thought it might help him feel safer. Thankfully, after we got the cat, we didn't have any other issues like that again. That said, strange things still happen in our apartment. Occasionally, objects go missing only to reappear later. For example, just last week, I lost a press-on nail. I had set it aside to glue it back on, but when I went to grab it, all my nails were already back on my fingers, even though I had been staring at the one that had popped off just minutes earlier. There are so many odd little moments like this, but I'm glad the scarier incidents have stopped. I also have some paranormal stories to share, but since I live in Appalachia, I know better than to talk about those at night. Story 6. This is messing with my head big time. I visit my mom every single day. She lives alone, and it's part of my routine. I drop my fiancé off at work, then head straight to her house. I hang out for a few hours, pick up my fiancé after work, and we go home to our apartment. Same thing every day. Rinse and repeat. A few months ago, my mom had all the locks in her house changed. The previous owners hadn't left keys for every lock, so she decided to replace all of them for peace of mind. I was there when she did it, and I have keys to all the locks now. My keyring only has 4 keys: her garage door/laundry room door key, our apartment mailbox key, her front door key, and my car key. That's it. Every day, I enter through the garage door, which leads into the laundry room. I always have to unlock it, no exceptions. Yesterday, my key worked perfectly, just like it always does. Today, it doesn't. I stood there for what felt like forever, trying to unlock the door. No matter what I did, the key just wouldn't work. Frustrated, I gave up and went to the front door instead. Thankfully, I keep her front door keys on a separate ring in my purse, and those worked fine. Once inside, I went straight to the laundry room door and tried the key again. Still nothing. I grabbed my mom's set of keys and tried hers. Same result, her key didn't work either. She had a few spares made when she changed the locks, so I tried all of those too. None of them worked. It was like the lock had been swapped out overnight, even though nothing else in the house seemed out of place. I was completely baffled. How could the lock not work when it was fine just yesterday? I even inspected the lock to see if someone had tampered with it, but everything looked normal, and the house alarm hadn't gone off. At this point, I was beyond confused. I tried a total of 10 keys, all of which used to work, and none of them fit. It made no sense. Now, here's where the story takes a turn. After a few hours of frustration, I decided to Google what might cause a lock to suddenly stop working. One of the suggestions was corrosion in the lock mechanism. I didn't have any WD-40 on hand, so in desperation, I sprayed a little non-stick cooking spray, yes, Pam, into the lock. To my shock, it worked. I know using Pam on a lock is not recommended and can damage it further, but at that moment, I was just relieved to get the door open. Still, I can't wrap my head around how this happened. The lock had worked perfectly fine the day before, and there was no reason for it to suddenly stop working overnight. I'm sharing this story because, for a while, I was convinced it was a glitch in the Matrix. It really felt like reality had shifted, and I had stepped into some alternate version of my mom's house. While the explanation turned out to be a mechanical issue, the experience left me shaken. It's a good reminder that sometimes even the strangest situations can have a logical explanation, but not always. Story 7. For some background, my parents divorced when I was a baby, so I grew up with a stepmother, a stepsister, and a half-brother on my dad's side. One weekend, when I was staying at my stepmother's house, I was hanging out with my stepsister and a teenage neighbor who lived across the street. My stepsister and I were about 9 years old at the time. As we were talking, the neighbor casually broke the news to me, mocking me in the process, that Santa Claus wasn't real. I was devastated. I've always been a very honest person, even as a kid, so finding out that my mom had lied to me about Santa for my whole life felt like a huge betrayal. I was heartbroken. When I went back to my mom's house that weekend, I cried and told her the truth about Santa, explaining that my stepsister had told me. I also told her how angry and hurt I was that she had lied to me. My mom tried to comfort me, but I felt like my entire world had crumbled. The next weekend, I was back at my dad's house, still reeling from the news. I brought up the topic of Santa Claus with my stepsister, expecting her to at least acknowledge what she'd told me. To my surprise, she looked confused and said she didn't know what I was talking about. She denied ever saying anything about Santa not being real. Then my dad and stepmother got involved. They scolded me for ruining Christmas for my stepsister. They insisted I had been the one to tell her the truth about Santa, not the other way around. I was completely stunned. How could she deny what she had told me? And how could my parents believe that I had been the one to spill the beans? I was so upset, but no one believed me. Fast forward to when I was 20. I was talking to my stepmother about random childhood memories and brought up the Santa incident. I told her how my stepsister had been the one to tell me the truth, and she stopped me mid-sentence. She said, "That's impossible. You're the one who told her." I'll never forget how upset she was. Completely confused, I called my mom. I asked her if she remembered who had told me about Santa, and she confirmed. "It was your stepsister. I remember how upset you were about it. You cried for hours and said you felt betrayed." Her memory matched mine exactly. To this day, I have no explanation for how this could have happened. I remember my stepsister telling me, and I also remember being scolded by my dad and stepmother for allegedly telling her. It's as if both versions of the story are true, existing simultaneously in some bizarre, conflicting way. The only explanation I can think of is that I somehow shifted into another universe after the weekend when she told me. Maybe in one version of reality, she really was the one who told me, and in another, I was the one who told her. The idea of dreaming, it doesn't make sense to me because I have such vivid, clear memories of both events, and I've always been able to differentiate dreams from reality. Story 8. Spontaneous human invisibility happened to my dad, only he never knew it. To start, my dad was always obsessed with closing the doors at night to not let the bugs in, Louisiana. This is important to the story. If we went outside, we had to do it very fast, or he would yell. One night in 1996, I was going out in New Orleans. It was Halloween night, so I was dressed as the Grim Reaper. Before I went upstairs to do my makeup, I told my dad, "They'll be down in 20 minutes. As I was walking down the stairs 20 minutes later, I noticed the front door was wide open at night. WTF? Trust me, this was a big deal. I looked outside and called for him. I looked where my dad always sits. The TV was on, and his cigarette burning all the way down on the ashtray next to where he sits. He never leaves his cigarette. I decided to wait. I sat on the couch in full makeup and black robe waiting 30 minutes for him to show up. I was watching his cigarette burn all the way down. All this time the front door would have been wide open had I not closed it. Finally I locked up the house and drove off to meet up with friends. The next morning I asked him, "Dad, where did you go last night? You left the front door wide open." He said angrily, "As if I would leave the front door open. I was here waiting for you to show me your costume, but you just disappeared." Story 9. Hey everyone. I've been a quiet lurker on this sub for a couple of years now. I've always enjoyed the occasional strange or thought-provoking story, but if I'm being honest, I never really believed anything like that could happen to me. I figured most of these glitch stories had some logical explanation, or maybe even a bit of exaggeration. But now, I'm not so sure. I think I just experienced my first real glitch in the Matrix, and it's been messing with my head ever since. Maybe someone here can offer an explanation, or at least let me know I'm not alone in this kind of experience. Last year, I bought a 23-foot motorboat. If you've ever owned a boat, you know it's a lot of work, especially after winter, to get everything cleaned, inspected, and ready for putting the boat back in the water. Earlier this spring, I spent 2 full days at the boatyard doing just that. I took down the winter pressing cover, polished the hull, did some minor engine maintenance, and carefully inspected everything to plan my to-do list for the season. One issue jumped out right away, and it got me seriously concerned. The teak decking needed attention. As is common on boats, my decking is made of teak slats with black Sikaflex rubber between each seam. What I saw wasn't just wear and tear, it was obvious and very visible. Several strings had come loose and were hanging out of their seams. The rubbery strings of Sikaflex weren't just loose in their seams, they were literally hanging out of the seams like spaghetti. Not just on one part of the boat, but both on the foredeck and the bathing platform at the stern. I remember staring at it, poking at it, and thinking, I really need to fix this before any water gets underneath the teak. I looked at it from multiple angles on several occasions, both days I was there, and mentally added it to my growing list of projects. I knew this wasn't something to put off. If water got underneath, it could eventually lead to the entire teak deck needing to be replaced, which would be a huge and expensive job. So, over the following weeks, I did my homework. I read DIY guides, watched videos, and researched the best way to fix the seams properly. I went ahead and bought the materials, marine tape, a caulk gun, Sikaflex, scrapers, all of it, probably about $100 total. I was ready. Last weekend, I went back out to the boat, fully expecting to spend a chunk of the day redoing the Sikaflex seams. I started on the foredeck. I crouched down, ready to assess the damage again, and everything looked fine. Not someone's patched this up fine, it looked like it had never needed repairs in the first place. The seams were uniform, neat, sealed. No sign of any hanging rubber. I was confused but thought maybe I'd misremembered which part of the boat had the issue. So I walked back to the bathing platform, expecting that to be where the loose seams were. Same thing. Perfectly intact Sikaflex. No visible gaps. No dangling spaghetti-like strings. I crouched down again and examined the seams up close, trying to find cracks or any signs that something had shifted or resealed itself, but there was nothing. No signs of repair, no residue, no unevenness, nothing to suggest the Sikaflex had ever been pulled out or disturbed. And just to be clear, this wasn't a case of me confusing new damage with old wear. What I had originally seen was unmistakable. Those strings of Sikaflex were literally hanging completely out of their seams, and I checked them multiple times over those 2 days. I stood there for a while just scratching my head, trying to make sense of it. No one else has access to the boat. I didn't hire anyone to fix it. I didn't even tell anyone it needed fixing. It's not like the loose strings could just fall perfectly back into place and rebond themselves, especially without a single crack or seam showing it ever happened. It's like the issue just never existed, as if I slipped into a slightly different version of reality, where my deck was always fine. I still can't explain it. Has anyone else experienced anything like this? I'm open to logical explanations, but it honestly felt like reality corrected itself. Or I stepped sideways into another timeline, where my deck never had a problem in the first place. Story 10. My son and I were in the checkout line after grocery shopping. The lines were kind of long, not too bad, but there was a bit of a wait. The customer in front of us was a tall black guy, and in his cart, he had like 3 packs of paper towels and a few frozen dinners. It reminded me that I needed paper towels. I left my son in line and went to grab paper towels. It took maybe 35 seconds. But by the time I came back, my son was starting to put our items on the conveyor belt, and the guy who was in front of us, his items were being scanned by cashier. Only now the guy was a really tall white guy. Like short blonde hair, blue-eyed white guy, and he had on the same outfit the black guy was wearing, and all the groceries were the same as his basket that I had seen earlier. I just thought I was going crazy, but in the car I said to my son, "Did you notice the guy in line in front of us?" I was going to say I could have sworn it was a black guy, but my son said, "Yes, and I'm tripping because I legit swear it was a black guy," but then he somehow turned into a white guy. Before I could finish my sentence, both the white guy and black guy were very tall. Much taller than anyone else in line, so you would definitely notice if 2 super tall men dressed alike would be in line, like if maybe they were both there the entire time. It was just weird, and also the fact that we both experienced the same possible glitch.